Hello adventurers, I'm Gray and welcome to another Hytale blog update, this time about 3 new pieces of music in Hytale. And while this is a pretty brief one without much story, lore, or world information, it does provide some new music which I've been pretty excited for because that means that I won't have to use the same 2 songs in every single Hytale video from here on out. There'll be a lot more variation. And additionally, these 3 songs are less ambient and more active, more themed, and more exciting, I think. Which I really like. These songs got me really excited for the soundtrack of the game, and I'll talk a little bit about the music and their inspiration for them, and about the composer. I might do a separate video on the composer, Oscar Garvin, sometime. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The track you'll hear playing right now is called A New Adventure. I'll get to that in a little bit, but let's start out with some basic info. Music plays a vital role in establishing the mood for your adventures. Over the last couple of months, they provided a few opportunities to sample the soundtrack, with 2 tracks before, Traveling Band and Night on the Dunes, which I've used in pretty much every video so far from Hytale, along with a mix of other music I found online that fits Hytale pretty well. However, this will give me more variety in the types of songs that you'll hear in the background at the very least, which is nice. In the key art showcase, they also had a couple of ambient songs in the back, which I also used in quite a few videos. Those are a little bit more somber and ambient. And now there's 3 more, along with developer insight into how it was composed. So the music is written in Logic Pro X. I'm not sure what the difference is between this software and other composition software. Must be pretty good though, considering how Oscar was able to make some nice songs in it, using sample libraries and a MIDI keyboard. He can load up a violin on the computer, for example, and play it with a keyboard while adding dynamic change using a modulation wheel, which I have no idea what a modulation wheel is, but I assume it's a wheel that modulates. I have to play in every single instrument and stack them on top of each other for a full piece, and the composition is often the easiest part. He spends most of the time finding the right instruments that work together so it all sounds as nice as possible. So you really have to make sure everything fits in together to make it sound good. I'm really bad at composing music. I've tried making some stuff before, but nothing really turned out that well. I'm trying to make a song with Hytale, but I can't, I don't know how to compose anything. The good thing about game music is that there are fewer rules, and you can get quite creative with Hytale because it's a fantasy world. Which is a good point. Since Hytale's a fantasy world, you don't have to worry about respecting conventional instrumentation, trying to make an orchestral thing based around real-world instruments and stuff. You can make it a little bit more creative because it's fantasy, of course. So, we start out with the first soundtrack, A New Adventure. And when I say first soundtrack, I mean it both in terms of this blog post and in-game, because this accompanies your initial adventures through Zone 1. And the wording here, initial adventures, tells me that we are guaranteed to start in Orbis. That's our starting Alterverse in Zone 1. Which is what I assumed to be the case anyway, but I saw some people online in their own videos and stuff talking about how perhaps we don't spawn in Orbis, perhaps we start on a different island and then go to Orbis, or a different planet. I'm pretty sure we start in Orbis now. We start in Zone 1 of Orbis, the basic green plains and forests, the basic thing that we know from other games like Minecraft, pretty much. Appropriately, it was also one of the earliest pieces that was created, the first exploration piece that Oscar wrote for Hytale, and it's gone through some changes. It's one of his favorite pieces because it brings him back to those days when he first joined the team and got to explore for the first time. Which is something to keep in mind because since this is one of the first tracks you'll hear, it'll be something that you'll remember years later on, if the game is good, of course. Kind of like how in Minecraft, a lot of people who played the game since their childhood will hear the song like da 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 da, and it'll bring them so much nostalgia for the game. Like, it actually makes me tear up sometimes whenever I go back, turn on music, and I'm just wandering the world, and all of a sudden, a song comes on that reminds me of some things I did as a child. Except Minecraft music is a lot more nostalgic and somber, and a lot more slow, whereas the music in Hytale seems to be more upbeat, or at least more themed, more active, and there's a lot more variety in the types of songs there, rather than the constant, somber, melancholic feel of Minecraft music. This song in particular makes you feel like you're embarking on a journey through the magical glades and plains of Zone 1, and he didn't want the music to loop for the most part, since the world is procedurally generated. You can't know exactly where the player will be or what they'll be doing, but he wants it to feel cinematic, like movie soundtracks, basically. Which is good, because that means there'll be a lot of variety in the songs, and you're not just hearing the same thing constantly, regardless of where you go. It'll be themed towards the area you're in, and even if you're in the same area, it'll change it up depending on what's going on around you. For example, it might play as you're exploring Zone 1 during the daytime, so it reflects specific elements along with broader themes of adventure and discovery. Exploration music is split into two schools of more active music and ambient music, and the music is chosen from a list of tracks who have varied experience. But what I was going to say is the music may also change based on the weather and time of day, which basically means that depending on the mood of the world, the music will also shift its mood. So a sunny day will have upbeat music, whereas a rainy day could be a little bit more slow and melancholic, and nighttime might be a bit peaceful. Or if you're getting attacked by monsters, maybe it'll be more hectic and scared. So we'll have to see how that goes. I'm excited for the soundtrack though, based on what I've heard so far. In this little adventurous clip here, there's not too much info to parse out, but we can see our guy standing on the shoreline on what looks like some sort of white rock. I'm not sure what type of white stone it is, so I won't give any predictions for it. However, he is holding the walking stick that I pointed out in the trailer before. That could be a weapon, or it could just be a stick you walk around with. And there's a different type of leaf on the tree, which is orange, that wasn't in the trailer, I believe, or at least I didn't point it out. So, just a good mix of adventurous things going on here. But what the most interesting to point out here, though, is the water. Look at how pretty the water is in this. It looks really nice. It reminds me of shader packs in Minecraft, because in Minecraft, if you get Optifine, you can download shader packs and equip them, such as Sonic Ether's Unbelievable Shaders, or SCUS, and they make the water look really nice, along with shadows and stuff like that. This reminds me of that, but just in the base game. It's really pretty, and I like it a lot. The next one's really interesting, because it's called Kweebec Village. You'll be hearing it right now, and the title of the piece tells you everything you need to know. It is the soundtrack to the Kweebec settlements you'll encounter in Zone 1, and its tone and instrumentation reflect the personality of the Kweebecs themselves. When he wrote the theme, he knew it had to be cute, light, and playful, so since the Kweebecs are sort of happy creatures, they're living in the forest, minding their own business, taking care of themselves, it's sort of light, upbeat, cheerful music. So the instrumentation and harmony draws on my JRPG influences, which is something my friends might like to hear because some of them like JRPGs. So it has a theme that reminds me of other games like Zelda whenever you're in your starting village or finding a new village. Or maybe Pokemon, a different town theme. Or more than anything, it just reminds me of a fantasy theme. Fantasy village. And I think it sounds pretty nice. It's very cheerful, very happy. And it's probably my favorite song out of these three so far. It really sticks in my mind and I keep listening to it on my own. The piece sounds like a small ensemble to create the sense that Kweebecs might be playing this tune as you walk into the village. And here we see a nice little gif of the Kweebecs here, which looks nice. It's very smooth. And the thing that I want to point out here is that the Kweebec is waving to us like it's using some sort of emote. And the thing about that is I've never seen the NPCs do emotes before, and this makes me more curious as to whether or not we'll be able to play as the NPC tribes like the Kweebecs in this game. Because I know players can do this emote, and this is the exact same emote I saw a player do in the trailer, I believe. So this could be a player playing as the Kweebec, waving at us in an emote to make it look like an NPC is doing it. And that makes me excited to see what races we can play. Some other things to point out in this little clip here are the moss on the logs at the top left. I'm not sure if that's a decorative element that you can place on the logs, like moss you place down, or if specific logs will have that on them. We'll have to see. There's also the classic fireflies in a container that the Kweebecs use for lighting, and you can see some crops in the fence to the left, though I can't quite tell what they are. They look like they're orange, so they might be carrots or pumpkins, but they don't exactly look like they have the same texture as them. So we'll have to see from a better angle in the future, potentially. It says, Kweebecs are welcoming folk, but don't show up in their villages wielding an axe. That's probably a good idea, and I think it'll be funny if they actually attacked you if you walk up holding an axe to them. Just holding an axe, you start chopping their house, just like, hey, hey! The piece incorporates ornamentation like trails and other playful embellishments to the basic melody to make it fun and carefree. There are also orchestral elements that thicken the sound, as if the Hytale soundtrack itself is behind a small Kweebec band. I usually perceive the music as if someone is playing it, often viewing the instruments as characters in the story. And hopefully this works well to make the music feel like it has a place within the world rather than having a disconnect. Hytale's music helps us to tell the story of Orbis. The themes being expressed in any given piece reinforce specific elements of lore, and he made use of the Hytale motif as a key building block when creating this melody, since the Kweebecs are important to the story. So the Kweebecs are definitely going to have a place in the lore of the world and setting up the plot, and I'm curious to see how they interact with the main story of the game, whatever that may be. And finally we have Gaia's Lament, which you'll be hearing right here. This is a sort of deserty theme, melancholic, and it's supposed to represent Zone 2 a little bit, which is the really dry desert and savanna zone. It's an exploration piece that covers a different location, which is the lonely wasteland aspects of Zone 2. It evokes a barren, desolate expanse, as well as introspective feelings of pain and regret. It has 4-part harmonies, which is used here for a classical requiem feel towards the end of the track. He also began experimenting with space to create a sense of a vast, lonely environment. It required some restraint, stretching material out over time and literally leaving open spaces in the music, which is evident around 2:30 with a lonely flute crying out into nothingness. And you can listen to these soundtracks on your own. They'll be in the blog update, linked in the description, or you can go to the Hytale YouTube channel, where it has all of them posted on there. They're all really good songs. I've been listening to them a lot. And we can see a little sandstorm going on here in Zone 2, which I don't believe was shown before. But look at the fog effects and the sand being flung around the screen here. This looks really cool. I really like the atmosphere. In terms of blocks shown, I don't really think there's too many new blocks. There might be some, but I don't know the names to them. However, I can see what looks like a new type of plant, which is a sort of desert plant growing from the ground. I don't know what it's called either. However, it does look different from the plants we've seen before. Palm trees, we've seen palm trees before. There is a different type of shingle going on the roof here. It's sort of brown and dirty to represent Zone 2. It could be from palm tree wood, though that is not confirmed at all. Here's a curious line. Why is it called Gaia's Lament? You'll just have to wait and see. This must have something to do with the story, and if I were to give a prediction as to why it's called Gaia's Lament, I would guess that Gaia was the goddess of the world. That's not a guess, she is, basically. She's worshipped as the creator of the world, basically. The Mother Nature. Worshipped by Firans, Kweebecs, and humans, and other intelligent races like that. And the fact that it's Gaia's Lament tells me that something went wrong with the world. Something bad is happening. Maybe Gaia's statues are falling apart. Maybe people have stopped praising her as much due to all the bad things that have been going on, likely caused by Varen. And we're going to have to figure out what happened and how to stop it. So, Gaia's Lament illustrates the sort of contrast we're hoping to create, from cute to epic, outgoing to introspective, upbeat to imposing. Despite this tonal range, one of the jobs of the soundtrack is to ensure it'll all come together in a coherent whole. A soundtrack has to have a sense of musical unity. It's done this not only through themes, but by using the same instruments to create the Hytale sound per se. Each area might have its own identity, but there's also an overarching sound that binds them all together. And most tracks include several themes that link to lore and location, as well as the main themes to glue everything together. Like a cue in a movie, a lot of the music might develop to end up somewhere very different from where you started, like you can in the game. This was very much a blog post for music nerds, which I am definitely one of those. I quite like this blog post and learning about how the music ties into everything. However, if I were to give one game that this music reminds me to the most, it is The Legend of Zelda. Which sounds weird because Zelda has very different music depending on the game that you're playing. However, the fact that they have different motifs that are going through the different songs that fit the location that you're in, however, they do have the main theme sort of linked into these different songs, just in variations of it, reminds me of how they fit the Zelda main theme into different songs within the Zelda universe, and it all sort of ties together to form a coherent whole that really fits the game. And I'm hoping this does that just as well, considering how Zelda has some of my favorite songs. In fact, I believe the Zelda series has my favorite video game song of all time, which I might mention sometime in the future. I won't tell you now. But this was a nice blog post, and that's really all for now. Hopefully you guys are enjoying these blog updates, and I hope to see you all on the next adventure.